Citizenship referring to the one nation state or multiple that you're registered under as a citizen. I'm a US citizen because I was born here and therefore via birthright, I am formally an American citizen. We could also talk about cultural citizenship, right? Cultural citizenship as referring to the ways in which people participate in the different cultures that constitute the nation state. If we're talking about my cultural citizenship, of course we can then break it down into multiple different identities and cultures. Graduate student, Asian American, Japanese American, Filipino American, rural, punk rock, whatever. However, these can all be understood as having a different relationship to US culture at large. And then we have pan-ethnicity. And so this is responding to the debate that was taking shape on the discussion board around whether or not, for example, Latino, Latina is a viable term to use. This is also a debate that arises in the introduction to the anthology Latino, Latina Popular Culture that I had you read. So on the one hand, we can understand the term as referring to racial difference. And in reference to the reading that several of you cited, that's Francis Aparicio's particular problem with using the term. It becomes very general, it then just reaffirms racial difference instead of contesting it, and it ignores all the different ethnicities and nationalities that take place under that umbrella. Like someone else said, it becomes kind of a catch-all term. So in that respect, these two terms are not that helpful. The reason why we're interested in them for this course is, on the one hand, to think about racial identity and racial difference, right? On the one hand, someone who is Colombian American versus someone who is Mexican American, the two of them have very different senses of ethnicity. But at the same time, the two of them may share experiences of racism and racialization that become very important for talking about racial identity versus racial difference in ways that ethnicity and nationality cannot. And if we're talking about pan-ethnicity, for example, if you look at the introduction to the anthology, Alien Encounters, there's a discussion of how the term Asian American itself was a result of political organizing in the 1960s and 70s. So we can understand pan-ethnicity as both a cultural and a political term, referring to these types of coalitions unified against racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, and other forms of discriminations under the categorical umbrella. So like a reclaiming of racial category and making it meaningful through this political activity. So we can then start unpacking race, ethnicity, nationality, and pan-ethnicity. And I'm going to ask you to be just as careful when you're using these different terms. Keep in mind, race and ethnicity, particularly in this course, are not the same. And by the way, to those of you who referenced Aparicio's article, I'm very happy that we have some people with a background in US Latino studies. All right. So I'm going to focus on some key passages from the two readings. The reason why we're interested in popular culture with respect to these two different pan-ethnic or racial communities is to think about the problematic space of popular culture. On the one hand, like the authors say on page 30, so here I'm looking at page 30, second and third line. We propose that popular culture holds out some very familiar and tired narratives, but also new and exciting promises. So if we're talking about popular culture as offering tired narratives, we're then talking about stereotypes, for example, that appear over and over again, or how there's always a new wave of the yellow peril, or how there's always a crisis over borders. These have a long history to them that just find new meanings in the present. On the other hand, if we're talking about the sort of exciting and newness that popular culture can bring, we're thinking about popular culture as the everyday culture that people engage in. So in that way, we're then talking about what everyday people are doing to contest racial difference, or to make pan-ethnicity meaningful, or to express ethnicity in a relationship to mainstream US culture. So both Alien Encounters and Latino popular culture are riddled with kind of large questions that you won't necessarily read about because these are from specific books. However, you might want to give some of those questions a consideration and read them over very closely, because that could be a way of either having something to contribute to the discussion board, or it could be as jumping point for having a longer journal. All right. So, in keeping with what's interesting about popular culture, I've drawn up this chart, kind of bringing together the two introductions, alien encounters and Latino-Latina popular culture. So, thus far we've talked a lot about politics. Politics with a lowercase p, and referring to exchanges of power or uses of power. We've talked a lot, for example, about stereotypes as regressive uses of power. We've also talked about interesting and new things, contestations and organizing that take place as a form of a progressive kind of politics. So we can understand politics as referring both to things that work towards equality and things that work towards a type of negative differentiation. Racism, sexism, classism, heteronormativity. On the other hand, many of you have talked about, well, the bottom line of popular culture is capital. And if we're thinking about mass culture, that's certainly true. So if we're talking about popular culture, we're thinking about this relationship between, on the one hand, politics. What does it mean and what does that do? And on the other hand, capital. What are the structures of finance? Who is profiting? What profit is being made? So we're understanding popular culture on the one hand as a semiotic economy, right? Exchanges of meaning, and a financial economy. Who's profiting and what makes this profit interesting to study. There's also a relationship between these terms, affect and aesthetic. So affect is the theoretical term for referring to emotions. So we can understand affect in terms of when you engage with popular culture and something irritates you or angers you, when something disgusts you, or when something confuses you, or when you just enjoy it for what it is. There's something very important about affect that doesn't really get paid attention to. So for